Hello, friends and gamers, and welcome to the Fortress here, and welcome to the Think Tank on Wintermute's channel. We're doing two videos. We're putting them on both, or we're doing one video, putting them on both channels, just because I think for me, I like having those extra videos as something to look back to, and that way, if I'm ever looking through our stuff, we could go back and makes it a nice series too. Anyways, today's video, we're working through progress of reviewing the manual for Global War 36 version 4. Right now we're on chapter 5. We're going to take a look at chapter 5, maybe see how far we get. We might even get to 6 and 7. We'll see how it goes. Those are fairly short chapters, so I have to see how it goes. We're looking through these rules. These are not the final rules. So if you're viewing this and you're like, hey, that's not something that shows up in my manual, it's because these rules are continuously in development, and you might be looking at this 6 months in advance. It's because this is kind of a work in progress, and things that we address this week might not be there next week. And as a case in point, there's one issue I wanted to refer to in regards to Siam, and our memory, or my memory, is not that great. So me and Winchmeat were discussing Siam in the last I don't know if it was last episode or maybe the one before, and how we thought it was a little bit strange where, say, if Japan is at peace with Britain and then Britain declares war on Siam for whatever reasons that they make up, they declare war on Siam and Siam becomes aligned to Japan. Now, does that suck Japan into a war with Britain?
Well, I thought it was that Siam would join Germany.
Right, or would they join, like in version 3, would Siam join Germany? And that's what version 3 would be. So we're left a little bit puzzled as to how it would work exactly. So we addressed this issue a couple of weeks ago, whatever it was, and now the rules state in the previous version, in the example there, it would align to Japan, but only if Japan is at war with Britain. Otherwise, it would just become a controlled minor power, regardless.
Which it already is.
It would already be, yeah. But regardless, if Britain would be at war with Germany and Italy, it would still become only controlled nation up until Japan goes to war. So that's one of those changes on there. Now, I brought this up too in reference to I had a talk with Doug from HBG, and he was saying, like, look, you guys should point out everything that you say here, any questions that you have, write it up and email it back to them. Frankly, I don't have the time for that. I don't really have the time to write up stuff too much. I got too many other projects on the go. And so if you guys, and also, the problem with what we are doing here is I'm not keeping up with what the Discord channel says. So people might have already brought up the issue as well. So it might be just duplicating people's efforts. So if you, the viewer, has come across this issue and you're fairly on top of things and know what's been said on the Discord channel, feel free to share it with the higher ups and to get this address, whatever things that we address, fixed, if you feel like it, if you feel it's even an issue. I just want to say that and bring it up to people's forefront of their attention, just in case. So I also want to say that me and Wintermute here, so we don't have a perfect understanding of the intentions behind the designers on this stuff. Like some of the stuff, the way we interpret them through our own perspective and lens, and that's not going to be the way the designer intended it by any stretch, right? So it just means it's just.
I hope it is, because that's how the rule should.
That's the hope, right? That's the hope, is that when we read through this is the way people pick it up. But let it be used as kind of a data point to the developers and say, okay, so even though me and Winchmeat might be at the extreme of the bell curve somewhere here, and the average person wouldn't have it here, but just to have those two data points to say that me and Winchmeat, we interpreted it slightly off, different, and they might need to add an extra couple sentences just to bring our interpretation down to the average of the bell curve, essentially, right? So something like that. I think that's a sufficient introduction to what we're trying to do.
So in other words, we're not perfect.
We're not perfect, no.
And we have no intention of limiting ourselves to one data stream for information regarding the game.
Right, yeah.
Or any game, for that matter. I mean,
how do you mean one data stream? Because for me, I'm using the data stream of just the manual.
So let's look at what we were just talking about, Pathfinder 2nd Edition.
Okay, yeah.
Data streams to get information back to the creators. YouTube, Discord, Twitch, even.
Right. Okay.
Email, open letters, gaming forums, you name it.
Yeah.
House, any kind of way you put information out there is a potential information stream.
Yeah.
I'm never going to limit myself to just one stream.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's perfectly reasonable for people to discuss something outside of that stream.
Right.
I mean,
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
And I mean, some people have said, well, do this and do that. Well, everything's like, I've actually had comments from people who were very rude, whose comments have been deleted now. Well, that was already answered on Discord 2 weeks ago. I don't know that.
Right. right.
Number one, I don't have time to sift through all the data on Discord. Number
Yeah,
two, I'm not limited to Discord.
right.
Okay. And I've just been watching a ton of videos about Pathfinder Second Edition, getting in preparation for playing that again.
Right,
And
right.
there's numerous data streams all over the place.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
no, it's ridiculous to say we should
Yeah.
be limiting ourselves, or that just because this has already been talked about somewhere over here, we
Yeah.
should obviously know that. No, that's
Right,
not true.
right, right.
I'm not going to accept that kind of attitude either.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So don't give me that crap.
Right. So I'm limiting myself to just this, just because I don't have time for anything else. And you're roughly the same thing with some extra stuff, right? So
I am
Yeah.
mostly up on Discord now.
oh, okay,
But
gotcha,
there's
gotcha.
no way that I can
Yeah.
remember mentally
Yeah.
everything that's been
Yeah.
discussed. I mean,
Fair
there's so
enough,
many
yeah.
topics that come up that get clarified.
Yeah.
I trust that a lot of it
Yeah.
is sifting back to the chief designer
Yeah.
and thus into the final version of the rules. That's the whole point of all this. Now,
Let me
this
quickly-
is just another data stream
Yeah.
aside from Discord.
Right.
And I like the idea of trying to cross connect when
Right,
we
right,
can,
right.
but
Yeah.
there's no way that I'm going to limit myself.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Let me
and
illustrate a
not,
point
not
that-
make videos about the game. That's
Yeah.
strange. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me illustrate a quick point too. I know we're a little bit off tangent here, but me and you had this discussion once before, maybe off camera, but it was about how we approach this game with a lot of preconceived notions of how things work, like Axis and Allies and other stuff, right? And I don't even know if Axis and Allies deal with this, but in the rulebook of Global War 36, they never address how you move units. I don't think they did in version 3. Like we talked about this, I think, right?
Oh, no, it was in the wrong spot.
Wrong spot.
It was in
okay.
core concepts,
Core
but there is
concepts, yeah.
no concept of, there's no basic discussion of movement in the movement section,
Right. Okay. Yeah.
which
So
that
it's-
is cool. You heard my tangent on that.
Yeah, yeah. So that's interesting, right? Like we approach it with like preconceived, it's built on the shoulders of giants, as the manual says in version 4, right? So it's like you have to be familiar with the previous versions to kind of really get the full grasp of this. And so the ideal thing for manual design should be that you should just read that manual, and that's the only thing that you need to play that game. You
Yeah,
shouldn't
no,
have a
oh, no.
familiarity.
I didn't read that in the manual. No,
No.
I would have
In the
made a whole other
introduction-
video about that.
In the introduction, it says it's based on the shoulders of the giants that came before, but it's not saying is kind of honorary tip of the cap to the
Okay,
people
okay,
that
I
came before. It's
misunderstood,
not
yeah.
to say that you have to read all this stuff, but what I'm saying is like me and you, when we're reading this manual, we're trying to kind of I am in some level, not deliberately, but I'm isolating it to just what I read here and not what I read on Discord and the comments section. I'm just kind of judging it by what's in front of me here in this chapter, kind of, well, and where
Right,
references to
The
other chapters.
rules. We're looking
Yeah.
at the rules.
And I'm not,
We're judging the
right.
rules based on the rules and
Yeah.
nothing else. Yeah.
nothing else, not some post on some Facebook page or something like that, right? You know, it's hard to keep those things lined up. Anyways, that was a fairly long intro.
So we are in chapter 5, War
Chapter
and
5, yeah.
Peace.
Yeah.
Now, I want to preface this going into this chapter. I do know on Discord there is a huge, long discussion and have been numerous long discussions about declarations of war
Right.
and some of the more fiddly points about it.
Mhm.
So I'm not going to delve into that because I don't feel I have all the I'm not fully equipped to do that. So we are, but there are still several things worth talking about in this within this chapter. But I know there are some fiddly points that have to be worked out or will end up being worked out when it comes to the wording in the final version.
Right. Okay.
But for the most part, declaring war is much the same as it was in 3rd edition.
Mhm.
Now I know there are some actual limitations, though, more limitations than what you were used to in 3rd edition. Because in 3rd edition, it was basically anytime, anywhere, under any circumstances.
Yeah.
That's not true anymore.
No.
There are
that's
some
true.
limitations. Basically, you can't declare war during this particular event. And I
Right.
think I think the game needed that.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
I think
yeah.
and I understand what the designers were going for with that. They wanted to give people a reason to interact and watch the board and pay attention to the board when they were waiting for their turn.
Mhm.
And that is a noble goal.
It is. Yeah.
It is an absolutely noble goal, especially when you've got a game that can go a while between turns.
Mhm.
However, it did create, and so they kind of created this default just anytime, anywhere. And I know a lot of version 3 questions centered around when and where you can declare war and what the consequences of. Okay, well, I'm moving this ship here, and then I
Yeah.
declare war, but I haven't
Yeah.
finished. But I was going to move this ship. Oh
Yeah.
no, that ship is. a lot of fiddly things.
It
And so
was,
I
yeah.
think the game really did need to have a couple sections of the turn that were just blocked off.
Yep, I
That,
agree.
nope,
Yeah.
this is a no-go zone for declaring war. You just
Yeah,
can't do it
I think
here.
that's fair.
You
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
do it here.
You can stop,
You can
go
do
get a
it
coffee.
any other
Yeah,
time
yeah,
is
yeah.
fine.
Yeah,
And it still gives you plenty of reason to watch the board
that's
and
right.
pay
Yeah.
attention and really be like, hey, he's doing it.
Mhm,
Are we going to
mhm.
go with plan Alpha Tango Whiskey?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Hey, stop. We're going to declare war right now.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That is actually good. I do
Mhm,
like that. I
mhm,
just think, and I think this is a better, I think it's overall though, that will be more clear on how that works in this in
mhm,
fourth edition.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. I had to read through this chapter, and I want to say right up front, I like the layout of it, right? It's a table of information. You can easily find exactly what you need in reference to whatever nation it is, right? So I think it's a very efficiently designed system, and the logistician kind of aspect of me likes it, or whatever it is, not logistician, but the efficiency side of things. And I think it just makes all
It's
kinds of sense.
clear.
Clear,
Clear to
very
look
clear.
at.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah,
having
that's
that
right.
problem right now when I go to Pathfinder, where they give you a description of an ability and it's a paragraph. I have to read
Right.
the entire
Yeah,
paragraph. Okay, it's a -2 to
yeah,
this,
that,
-2 to this.
yeah.
I want bullets.
Yeah, and this is fantastic, because
This
this is
is
written
much
in like a
so
either or
I
situation.
completely
Yes,
understand
yeah,
what you're saying,
yeah,
and I
yeah,
agree
yeah,
with it that charts like this usually are more beneficial than
yeah.
if you were to place this chart with a paragraph trying to describe all
Oh yeah,
this,
yeah.
it would not work anywhere near as
No,
well.
no. Yeah. Like, yeah,
So
perfect. Anyways.
so real quick, most of these conditions I think are pretty much the same as they were in version 3 about who can declare war and who.
Mhm.
I didn't really see anything different. Now Russia is a little different
Yeah,
now.
Russia's a bit different. Yeah.
But other than that, no, the Axis can't declare war on a national of Spain.
Mhm,
CCP and KMT have their limitations.
mhm.
Britain, France, and the US and Free French have some limitations. There's still that 10, they still got to pay $10 to the bank to do it. As kind of I think that kind of represents democracies aren't supposed to be declaring war on other democracies.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's generally speaking. Now you could make this more complex than what it already is, but I think that's something better for an expansion. But like,
No.
but democracies being aggressive, there should be a penalty for that,
Sure.
historically speaking.
Yeah. Now, for me, I try to. What that's supposed to represent is like the neutral nations are like, well, we don't want to trade with these guys so much anymore with our income and stuff. So that's why the penalty is in there. I like it. Part of me wonders from the game design perspective, should it be any kind of different thing? Should it be like the more the allies declare on neutral nations, the more likely it is for other nations to align with Germany and or the Axis and the Comintern? I think that would be my preference, to see something like that. If the allies are being kind of aggressive worldwide, people start looking at the Axis and the Comintern as maybe the preferred people to be playing with. But that adds a whole nother level of complexity. So I like the system.
And I think that might be something for a better
expansion
version of the
or
diplomacy
something.
expansion.
Yep,
Or something like that.
something like
you
that.
could go into the reality, because that did happen.
Mhm.
Britain and Russia did a joint invasion of Iraq.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
that was a real thing that happened.
Yeah.
So you could cover something like that in an expansion where you kind of
Yeah.
fine tune almost each nation into its own kind of
That's
like,
right. Yeah.
well, when the circumstances are right, Britain and or Russia can declare war on Iraq without penalty, or whatever the case is, just for example.
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't remember really seeing anything too much crazy different, other than Russia being a little different.
Yeah, the peacetime income increases have changed. We could
Yes.
touch on that. 1 dice
Now.
6 from 37, as opposed to whatever it was, 38, I believe, is when they started otherwise.
Well, Russia's now 37. Yes, everybody else is still 39.
No, but what I meant is Russia before started rolling for their income increases. Maybe it was January 39 or whatever it was, July 38. Now it starts rolling from.
Yeah, Russia started rolling is the same turn as all the other major powers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So 39,
now,
whatever it was.
Now here, okay, well, let's just, we want to talk about Russia, but I want to talk about one thing that still bugs me.
Right.
And that is the huge variation in these peacetime income increase rolls.
Oh yeah.
And I already see this as being potentially an issue.
Yeah.
You roll three ones or twos in a row, and the entire course of the game is changed on that one on just those couple. I mean, and you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
But almost all of the peacetime income increases have stayed exactly the same.
Yeah. Like, so you have an 8.3% chance on dice 12 to hit each one of those numbers, right? So it's like, it could be, 8.3 chance of hitting 12, 8.3 chance of hitting 1. It's not a bell curve of averages. So realistically, what they should do is 2 dice 6, and then you have kind of a bell curve. I mean, it's a triangle, but it's more likely, if you ever play Settlers of Catan or whatever, it's more likely to hit those central numbers first, right? Or more often than the other ones. And I think that's what they should do. That way the extremes are still there and pose that little bit of risk, but you'd also have that interesting center part where it's more predictable, more average. And I think that's what
you want to roll those red numbers.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. For Catan. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Or I guess it's just Catan now. It's not Settlers of Catan. It's just Catan.
Is it? Oh, fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah. Well, they've rebranded it now.
Yeah.
And it's
right.
you can actually buy it at Walmart now.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen
it's actually become a big enough game.
Yeah. It's fun. Yeah.
So anyway, I actually heard somebody propose that I had a discussion about this with somebody on WhatsApp, and somebody proposed that a 1d6 plus 3 should replace all of the 1d12s.
Yep. And that would,
and I said, you know what? That's even better than the idea I came up with. I'm going to go with that.
But you still have
now. I will say this. The first couple times I play this game, it is going to be absolutely strictly by the book. No house rules.
For sure.
No, every new game deserves that.
Yeah.
Every game gets that fair shot. And sometimes, and again, I watched a video where somebody discussed this with Pathfinder. If you start tweaking this over here,
you never know. That's right. Yeah.
And so you got to look at the whole thing. And it's and even games that I do have house rules for, I guarantee I played Star Trek Panic 10 times under the core rules before I decided, you know what, this one rule just needs to go.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It just drags the game down, so it needs to go.
Yeah. That's right.
I'm worried this is going to be that kind of rule.
Sure.
The sheer variation in these dice.
Yeah.
So when I get the chance, so assuming I'm not wrong, I reserve the right to be wrong. I think that is probably going to be the route I'm going to go. Is I'm going to try 1d6 plus 3, so that these huge swings of this super important number isn't so wide.
I see. So you're not going to do 1 dice 12 plus 3. It's 1d6 plus 3. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. That makes sense. That brings it to the average. Okay. Because I was thinking initially that you were thinking 1d12. And I was like, wow, that massively skews the game.
No. That would make it even worse.
Yeah. And I'd say too, like, there's a caution to anybody who tweaks the rules, or people who are say things too boldly and say, well, obviously this is a flawed feature and it should be removed from the game. It's like, well, if you remove that feature, you don't know what's going to happen on this side of things, right? So you have to be a little bit cautious about that too. And that arrogance, you need to tamper down, not you, but people need to tamper down that arrogance.
We know you're talking about.
Okay, fair enough.
Stop it.
No, not specifically, but it could apply to you.
So anyway, but this, I was actually surprised that they left that, but there it is.
Yeah,
that's what we're going to be playing with the first couple times. So with that out of the way, let's talk about Russia.
Sure.
Russia's starting income is 4. They start rolling in January, at the beginning of each year in January of 36, and they start rolling a D6. So they're going to have 3 D6. So they're going to have 3 to 18 more IPPs before they would have traditionally in version 3 started rolling for rearmament like all the other major nations. So they're going to be more of a, instead of like, okay, we're moving along. Okay, maybe we get a boost here, and then we start ramping up with everybody else. They're going to be more of like, probably more of a smooth curve.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they're going to. So the trade-off is they start lower, but they will probably end up with more on average IPPs earlier before 39 than they would have in version 3.
Theoretically, yeah.
It's those first couple turns though that are going to be really where they can't do crap. They have four bucks. Yeah. I mean, and I've always said the biggest, most bitter pill to swallow with Russia is those 8 IPP that you start off.
Yeah.
It's even lower this time around. And I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying when you play Russia, it's just like, this is it.
Yeah.
This is all I got. That's what it feels like sometimes.
I know we shouldn't get into this because it could potentially, it's hardship and stuff, and people don't want to introduce hardship in this game, right? But the Great Purge happened roughly around that time, right? 36 to then. So I would like to see a game where you have something, you have some sort of thing, and then you're like, okay, do I want to take the dive and do the purge now and then lose 3 turns of income or whatever it is, to get down to like almost nothing and then slowly build up my income? Or do I want to try to go this way and maybe have some negative bonus once war breaks out for the first 3 turns, right?
That's
Where all your
that's an
yeah, like
interesting
theoretically
choice
you'd
to
have
give the Russian player.
right
Once
you're
when
at
do you
war
do
with
the purge?
right. Let's say you're at war with a major power and you have a -1 for all your combat rolls for every single unit if you don't do the purge for
Okay,
3 turns, right, against a major power. But you could do the purge early on game, sacrifice your income and slowly build it up, right?
I get what you're going for. I will throw this out though. I will throw this out for the same reason why we shouldn't have concentration camp tokens.
Right. That's why
maybe we
should
shouldn't
introduce
do
hardship
either.
No,
I mean,
you're
but I get what you're
absolutely right.
going for.
Yeah,
Conceptually, it makes sense. However, it being what it is, we're
That's
probably
right,
better. I think in the long run, we're better off leaving it to the wayside. Though that concept may be applicable elsewhere with Russia itself.
Yeah.
So I understand what you're going for, though.
No, and you're absolutely right. It's like one of those things that we shouldn't introduce that level of hardship into, or whatever. Maybe hardship's not the right word, but we don't want to go into that route.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a dark alley, right?
It is. It is. And it's beyond this. I mean, we all know the history.
Yeah.
We know nobody, aside from the few idiot Holocaust deniers, everybody understands what happens.
Yeah,
and now we know that basically Russia was just as bad as Germany for liquidating its population. We now know that. So it is what it is. We don't need to delve too deep into it.
No, that's right. Yeah.
But historically, we know what happened. We don't need to dwell on it.
No, that's right. Yeah. Moving on, unless you have something else you want to address.
Nope.
Okay. So the next point I would have go on.
Oh, there is one other point we should make about Russia. And that is when they can declare war.
Okay.
And that they can declare war based on a date. They don't have to be at their full income level. Now that is the same as version 3.
Well, yeah, in version 3 it was a date. Yeah.
Is it I can't remember exactly.
It was on a date, yeah.
But it still roughly works the same. So Russia can still get to now. If Russia declares war, it's still the same. Where if they declare war, they don't they get their sleeping bear rolls until they hit wartime economy.
That's right. Yeah.
And I want to say there was one other caveat with version 4 with that they added, but I can't remember what it is. So
yeah.
But anyway, I just wanted to point out that all that fiddly stuff with Russia is still there.
Yeah.
Which is good. Is good. Russia should be a little. They're kind of an awkward one to play.
Yeah, in this case, it's so sorry. Unless I missed what you said there, but now you can declare war only when you're at wartime income against neutral nations.
No.
Yeah, it says it up here. Unless I'm misreading this here, but aggressor, USSR, any other nation, yes, once at wartime income.
Once at wartime income. It's a wartime income.
Yeah, so
I don't. You know what?
It's going to be at
pull up.
It's going to be at 19 IPP, which is not high, I guess.
Oh, is 19?
That's what it says when you
right.
scroll up.
Okay,
here.
that's what I was getting wrong. That they changed wartime income. Never mind. Yeah. Okay. Wartime income is 19.
Yeah.
I was that's what I was trying to find.
Right.
It's not 46.
No.
That's their cap, but their wartime income is 19. So once they hit 19, they can start declaring war on people.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's a different concept than
that I was.
So that's not, let's say theoretically 3.5 for every 1 die 6 roll. So you start with 4, 7, you're still going to be looking at roughly July 39, if not later, when you could declare war on nations, right? So yeah. Anyway, so that makes a Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. When you address that, that's going to be up there as well.
So wartime bonus income, declaration of war penalty, wartime bonus incomes are probably worth specifically talking about when we talk about the specific nations. No reason to go into them.
Wait, you should talk about wartime income and why it doesn't represent the map value, or what your thoughts are on that anyways.
What do you mean?
Well, so 19 as compared to 46.
For Russia?
Russia, yeah.
Well, okay. Now I'm not an expert on Russia.
No.
But there was, my understanding is that there was I watched a video about what if what's his name? Starts with a T. Trotsky. What if Trotsky had taken Russia over instead of Stalin? What if his faction had won out? And the author of this video theorized that Russia would have become far more aggressive
Yeah.
prior to World War II. That Trotsky was far more militant in his desire to spread communism. So he would have been far more active in inciting revolutions in neighboring countries. And then, okay, communists are being killed. We need to go rescue the
fight over there.
Whatever bullshit excuse they needed. So you could say, so in some ways you could represent different ideological factions within Russia. Stalin himself could have decided, you know what, maybe Trotsky was onto something. Let's just go. We see an opportunity, we see an opening. Let's be a little more aggressive. So in some ways you could look at it. Russia has a lot of they have ideological options. They could be hyper aggressive. They could be hyper conservative, which was probably a little more like what Stalin was. Because he expected to go to war with Germany. He just didn't expect it for another 5 years. And then you can get other people within Russia who have their own power base or some influence over Stalin, who might have convinced him to be a little more aggressive early on. So you've got a kind of middle of the road. Well, let's go into some of these territories down here in the Middle East, but we're going to leave Finland alone. Or we're going to push up into Finland and all these other places, and we're going to kind of spread communism there, but we're not going to worry about. So there's some compromise in the middle. So hyper aggressive, hyper conservative, and then somewhere in the middle. So I think it gives them that spectrum of choice. That's what I figured when they put it at 19.
Well, see, I guess what I'm getting at is I'm looking at this with fairly fresh eyes. Wartime income used to be representative of what territories they own on the map. This is how many IPPs the printed value on the map is. Now it's not that, correct?
Russia can't. Is that smart? God, boy, did I go off on a tangent there. Okay, I misunderstood what you're asking.
No, I didn't express myself very well. But basically, it's still 40. Like they still have a printed value, but let's assume somewhere up in the 40s.
The rationale is in what they call the ability. I think they called the ability disorganization or something like that, or inefficiency or something like that. And Russia was basically part of the reason.
I still don't know if you
level.
I still don't know if you get what I'm asking. In version 3, wartime bonus income simply represented the value of all your territories, right? Essentially.
You mean wartime income?
Wartime income represented. Wartime income represented the value of your territories, right?
No.
No. In version 3?
No. Let's say you conquered Mongolia for 2 IPP.
Okay, not in the pre-war, but once you're at war, like basically Britain's wartime income was the value of all your printed value on the map, basically, right? Once they were at war with a major power. In like you mentioned too, in USSR, it wasn't necessarily that. You had peacetime income plus this, whatever. What I'm asking, I guess, is the printed IPP value of all Russian territories going to be 19?
Oh, no.
No,
I don't think so. Good God, no. No, it actually says their cap income is 46. That's probably the printed value of Russia.
So why do they have here at the top? Again, I just
why is their wartime income at 19?
Right.
I think it clarifies, it simplifies. Okay, I think it works basically the same way it did in version 3. They've just made the mechanic a little more consistent. So they've changed the terminology. At 19 IPP, Russia can choose to be hyper aggressive, like I talked about. And so they're not limited like the democracies are to, they need the democracies. I guess one way you could look at it is the democracies need to be provoked a lot. And they need to be okay. Now you pissed us off. All the factories are fired up. All the troops are mobilized. All the ships are on alert. Whereas Russia was never at that point.
No, they're much easier.
Any time during the war where they were firing on all the cylinders. But they were still they still were vitalized, invigorated by that communist ideology. And if a more Trotsky-esque kind of mentality took over, they could have chose to be more aggressive. Even though they clearly were not ready for it, they could have chosen that. So I think that's why they chose 19 as the threshold there.
No, I guess for me, when I look at here, and I know it's worded differently, starting income, total value of land zones. So for me, I always assumed total value of land zones was kind of their wartime economy, even though it wasn't explicitly said that way, right? I always figured that was their thing. So maybe I'm just getting confused. I think this is
Well,
a bit of major tangent that didn't go any.
well, okay, imagine what if America had a revolution of its own and it
Yeah.
was less isolationist.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I get what you're
know,
saying. It's just that they've introduced a somewhat new mechanic that the new term and stuff.
I think they just tweaked it in a way that still makes
Yeah.
sense.
Because it
It's
used
just,
to be a
you're right, maybe it's not
technology.
jiving with what you kind of, your
Yeah,
kind of perception.
It just used to be a technology, and now it's a feature in the game of some other kind, right? So I guess that's all I was trying to point out too, and figure out a little bit. Moving on. So declaration of war penalty. I wanted to quickly address this, not that it matters too much. So they have changed something. Before it used to be you had to spend, what is it, 12 IPP to declare war against a neutral nation? I think it was us, or maybe it was it 12 or was it always 10?
It was 10.
It was 10. Okay, so now they've changed it for the penalty for the Americans to go down to 10 as opposed to 8. It used to be 8 and now it goes to 10. So when it comes to this stuff, when it comes to the Russian thing with the Russian slow buildup of income of 1/6 and only 4 IPP as opposed to 8 IPP, part of me says, why did they do that? Why did they change that? Well, I think the developers, and this is just pure supposition that has no basis except maybe, it has nothing to go on it. But why did they reduce the USSR income? Well, it's to prevent something that they didn't like happening on the board. What was it? They had $8 to spend. They had something that they can do in Spain, and they had something they can do in Abyssinia. Those are essentially the only two things. So in Spain, they were probably okay with whatever happened there. What can you send there for $8? Well, nothing really worth $8. A destroyer, well, they don't need it really, right? Aircraft, you don't have enough for it. Seaplane, not really much point to it, right? All these things. So it was only basically your mountain infantry with $4. So, that was not an issue. And then on this side of things, Abyssinia, they probably didn't like that people were sending stuff to Abyssinia. So I think from a design.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I don't know whether they, I don't know how they feel about it either.
Yeah, this is just pure speculation, right? So it could be for those reasons, maybe not. Now, in the case of the Monroe Doctrine, they felt that it was not sufficient. Hold on, did I read that right? Declaration of war penalty. Oh, maybe I didn't read that right. Yes, okay, I did. USA, if at peace, suffers a 10 IPV decrease each time it or an allies nation declares war on a neutral nation. Up from 8. It used to be 8, and now it's up to 10. Now, they, again, pure speculation, they did not like to see the allies declaring war on neutral nations. Now, I don't think it ever really came up.
I didn't like it either.
No, I mean,
because there's historical, like I said before, democracies are not supposed to be declaring war on other democracies.
The only two places that it occurred was in Iran, where it clearly did happen. I can't remember what it was called, but it was an operation there where they wanted to open up another lend-lease route to Russia. So the allies invaded the southern Iran, the Russians invaded northern Iran. So that clearly happened. And the other place that they considered it was Operation R or R4 or something like that, which was an invasion of Norway, which they had on the books, they had on the table, they had designated troops for it. The Germans got wind of their invasion, of their planned invasion of Norway, and the Germans invaded sooner. And it was supposed to be the British weren't sure if it would, how the invasion would have come across the Norwegians. Would they be at war or not? They weren't too sure. They didn't know. They thought there might be some fighting, right? But the French had actually dedicated some troops. This is during the Sitzkrieg between Germany and France, when France was not, too aggressive. Nothing much else was happening there, right? So they wanted to, what can we do to shake things up? And so they knew that the Swedish iron is going by Norway there, and they thought it was worthwhile taking out. So those are the two circumstances. So it wasn't out of the ordinary completely for the Allies to declare war against neutral nations. Anyways, all that being said, they upgraded this to 10 IPP, which is of interest. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's speculation. I think they just wanted to make it more painful.
Yeah,
I think if the British really did go around just invading everybody else that the Germans didn't invade preemptively, I think a lot of people would have been like, "Whoa, dude, are you serious?"
That's right. Yeah.
Well, what are you doing? I mean, yeah, we know you're coming out of that, hyper colonialist dickhead mentality you've had for a long time, but you're still supposed to be kind of the good guys by now.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And
one streamer I watched, Potato Vic Whiskey, put it best when he talks about why is Britain considered the good guys historically? Because they fought the Nazis.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
He goes, prior to that, they were the bad guys.
I don't think so. I would disagree with that.
I think he's on. He may be oversimplifying.
I think he's oversimplifying because who was the global policeman at that point? Who was suppressing slavery?
They were suppressing leading into World War II. They were coming out of that phase where they were bad guys.
No, however, I don't know about
if they didn't fight Nazis directly like they did, historically speaking, I think that they would have still been. Their historical perception would still be a lot more negative than what it is today.
I think modern revisionists would have painted them more negatively, but I think at the time people were like, "Who's suppressing piracy? Who's suppressing slavery? It's the British."
Yeah. Like I said, I'm not saying it's not a black and white issue.
And I'm not saying, of course, that the British were like
there is some merit to that. I think there is some merit.
Oh yeah. And of course, I'm not going to say that the British didn't have concentration camps in South Africa against the Boers. Like, don't get me wrong, they did concentrate the population. A lot of people starved, including the prison guards, right? You know, I'm just saying that they had such a poor logistical structure. They did cause the opium wars, well, not them directly, but the opium wars, you know, started by the Western democracies, and they were part of it. They did suppress a lot of people everywhere. Don't get me wrong, but to be painting them as the bad guys is like, no, I don't think so.
Look up the map of all the countries they.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. It's like, yeah, absolutely.
Shit, you know. And again, it's not a black and white thing.
Yeah,
but I think I think his point is taken with me anyway.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think you're looking at it with an American bias.
No, I think you're full of shit. I think you're looking at a Canadian with a Canadian bias.
All right, moving on.
So I believe they did clean up the Monroe Doctrine a little bit.
They did,
because there was some misunderstanding about, what if a nation aligned with Germany? Well, that doesn't trigger the Monroe Doctrine. And I think they cleaned up the wording with that.
Yeah, and that's nice. So they're progressively cleaning things up. Version 2 had no penalty for the Allies declaring war. It was exploitable. I stated as such, and I had something called the Joan of Arc strategy, where you could just basically, or even the Germans, Russians could be like, I declare war on Brazil. Oh, that makes an American's income go to full wartime income, right? It was called, I don't know, the Dirty Bear rule or something like that, Dirty Bear exploit, different things like that. So it's progressively cleaning up and sorting things out, and it's great. It's all great moves, right? So yeah. Absolutely.
So we've got the list of annexations here. Now, a lot of these go into the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact.
Again, I want to say that this is very nice to have this all in one place, right? In the manual, be like, zip, zip, zip. Okay, this is to be aware of, because otherwise you're like looking through everybody's reference sheets, being like, okay, all right, what was yours again? And what was yours again? And this is just nice, tidy. You read through the rule book and you're like, okay, I remember reading something about that, and it was somewhere here, right? So perfect. Well done. Well done.
So right from this chart, you can see Austria, Bohemia, Czechoslovakia are going to work pretty much just like they did before. Doesn't look like there's any difference there. Italy with Albania, same thing. USSR in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, same thing. Depending on the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. However, we know that there is another land zone in the form of Bessarabia that is between Romania and the USSR homeland.
Yeah, we do know.
We know that now. So that's there's more stuff about that involved with that. But so without seeing the map, we know that that's already another zone that has to be taken into consideration.
Super cool, right? That's cool.
And that it makes sense. And I like, so far from what I'm reading about, like the German wartime bonus income and whatnot, like so long they don't get the +3 from Romania, so long as Russia has Bessarabia.
That's right.
So I like the way the math kind of works.
That's right.
There.
Yeah,
and
it makes things interesting.
Discussion when we talk about Russia.
That's right. Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. That would be an interesting one to unpack. Yeah.
Player nations
Well, I'm of Czech heritage, so I have something to say here about. I think I should say something about Czechoslovakia. My parents emigrated in '83 or something like that. So they used to have the Slovakian rule. I don't think they have it in this game anymore. When I've reviewed the whole thing, they don't have
resistance.
Slovakian resistance rule.
Yeah, that was an optional rule in version 3.
Yeah. It was an optional rule. It was an optional rule that was never played because people are like, okay, so should we play the optional rule? Well, then the German player's like, okay, if we're playing with the optional rule, they're probably going to do the optional rule, like they're probably going to fire it off. So we have to prevent it from happening. So it's one of those things that by introducing the idea of the rule, you would always prepare for the rule, and therefore the rule would never happen. One of those things, right? So I know this is not in version 4.
And I actually think that that is an example of something that, again, could be in a more complex diplomacy expansion.
Right. I think so too. Yeah,
and I think
so
there's,
too.
I would like to see things about Poland, Finland, Sweden, Czechoslovakian resistance, some of those other Balkan states, a lot of stuff in the Middle East. There's a lot of interesting things that you could add to the game about the politics of that
That's
time.
right. Yeah.
That could give both sides more interesting choices.
Yeah.
Balance is still a thing.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of people hated the Slovakian rule because they said, oh my God, that's horrendous. My buddy John did the math on it, and he said, not as horrendous as it seems.
Oh, really? Okay.
It's not nowhere near as horrendous as it seems for the British.
I would
losing 3 IPP.
Oh, no. I was going to say it's something that the
math.
British should do every single time.
Oh, okay. I've heard the opposite argued.
Oh, okay.
I've heard the opposite argued.
Yeah, no. For me, it's
really
like
kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other, I think.
Well, it's like you get either in Slovakia, you have 2 infantry, so that's 6 IPP, and you have a fighter, so that's 10, so 16 IPP. So it's like, okay, so now we're how many turns away from war? 16 IPP I could remove from the Germans plus whatever they hit on the downsides. Like, so you could potentially take away 20 IPP from the Germans theoretically, right? Some from the last of the Slovakians, some for whatever you hit on the attack, right? So it's like, this is something I would do every single time. Now, it was a broken rule, but I don't think anybody saw that it was a broken rule because it was never played, because people would always prepare for it. But it should have been played every single time. As far
like
as
I said, I think that's a good option to see it in expansion.
Yep.
I would like to see it come back in that.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so are we good on that?
Yeah, we're good on that.
So defeating a nation. Player nations have different surrender conditions. If a nation surrenders, its units are removed from the board. Exception: France and Vichy France. Its controlled minor powers become controlled by another member of the alliance, or its controlled member powers become controlled by another. So, I guess now I don't know when that would actually happen. Like, but let's say Japan loses, but Siam is still under its control. Well, it would become under control of Germany, and I guess at that point it would theoretically align with Germany.
Yeah.
Theoretically.
I guess.
In a long shot kind of thing, but it's mentioned here, so there might be some scenario out there where it could happen.
But once it's aligned to Japan, it becomes effectively Japanese.
Yes, for all intents and purposes. I'm saying
Okay.
Like that's the example that comes to mind first.
Okay, fair
if
enough,
I really thought about it and sat down and thought about it, I'm sure there's something more applicable. It's in a long shot kind of situation that might happen.
But then it works against some other stuff.
But it probably did if it's mentioned here.
Yeah. It probably works against something else where it's like the Allies, can they declare war against Japan if Japan hasn't declared war against any other nation? Japan would align Siam by itself anyways. One of those, tricky things. They'd have to look through like 6 pages to see if it's even possible. And it's like, anyways, it's such a slim thing. Moving on.
Okay.
So surrender conditions. I think that's where we're at, unless you're somewhere else.
Yes.
So
surrender conditions.
Berlin, Germany can surrender if Berlin is occupied. CCP doesn't. USSR never does. Which for me, I think I have issue with that, but whatever. It's not a big deal. It's more a thematic issue rather than anything else. Okay. The axes have Japan. If Tokyo fails, Great Britain has London, Cape Town, Ottawa, Sydney, Calcutta. So that's a lot of stuff that you'd have to capture for them. So they're effectively never going to surrender. FEC, therefore, is effectively never going to surrender. And Anzac will surrender if both Sydney and all of New Zealand. So all.
Now that I think is different from last edition.
That is.
Because before it used to be just Sydney. Now it's New Zealand as well. And I could see that. I mean, New Zealand isn't a slouch of it. It's culturally, it's sort of lumped. I know.
Yes. Yeah.
It's forgotten about.
But
it's only really since the Lord of the Rings movies that it's kind of come into its own as people are aware that it's not part of Australia.
Yeah.
And it's actually a really cool place. It actually has a fairly decent economy and is is no slouch of a country.
No, I mean it's in the title as well. Australia, New Zealand, right? ANZ, armed. I don't know what the C stands for.
ANZAC or Australia, New Zealand,
Armed
Army.
Services, yeah, Army, but I don't know
Army.
what the C stands
Army
for.
Command.
Army Command, yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, yeah. So it makes sense that
Sounds
they
about
do
right,
that.
yeah.
But I was gonna more point out that all of New Zealand.
Oh, that's a good catch. I
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
catch that. Yeah,
yeah.
so I bet you New Zealand's got 2 lanes on it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. Another interesting thing too is when you get into these issues of all of Australia, all of New Zealand, all of Africa, like, yes, they cover in a certain, is it covered in the rules what they define as Africa? I mean, I'm sure you could, you know, everybody knows what Africa is, but it's like New Zealand, like, is it conceivable that somebody at some point will say the British Islands, and then they'll be like, well, does that mean Ireland? Because technically it does. Or does that mean just British owned stuff? Does that mean the British continental stuff, but not Northern Ireland? So it's one of those things
And
that
that's one of those things that they have to define in the rules.
they could.
They
I mean,
have
I
to.
think,
They,
yeah,
you just have you have to. If you're going to
but
say
they
the-
can get away with not doing it.
but then it's going to lead potentially to debate.
It will lead to debate, like the fact we're talking about it.
That's what you don't want. And
Yeah, yeah.
and yeah, I mean, I know that there was some confusion about, because they did mention the Indian and the Pacific Ocean in certain rules in version 3.
Which they clarified.
And
by
rarely,
yeah,
rarely did it come up. But there were a couple
Yeah.
times when I was playing Crimson Tide where it's kind of like, oh wait, where's the delineation
Yeah,
between
that's right.
India,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
the Indian Ocean and Pacific?
Yeah.
Now I think you're right. The information on how it's defined within the rules is out there, but I didn't have, it wasn't easy for me to get to.
No,
I had to go hunt it down.
And now it's going to be
And it
easier
ended
too
up
because
not
they
being an
label the
issue
C zones.
anyway,
Yeah. And they're labeling the C zones now P32,
Right, which is good.
I33. Yeah, it is good. Yeah.
I think that's the easiest.
But when it's
simplest way to
like-
do it, yeah.
When it's like blockading the British Islands, if you look at what the definition of the British Islands is, it's actually including all of Ireland as well,
All
whether
of
it's
Ireland.
neutral or not. Yeah, all of Ireland.
So an enemy would have to blockade Ireland as well.
Right,
even Southern Ireland. As
Right,
opposed to
right.
Northern Ireland.
So
I
then
guess
it was like-
Ireland proper.
What if neutral island is like, it's one of those weird issues that would never
It could lead
come
to
up because
some
nobody,
weirdness, yeah.
it could, but it's like,
And
well,
that's the sort
Ireland
of
is
thing,
neutral, so
though-
therefore you're not blockading them. But the rules say it's only blockaded if all of the British Isles is blockaded, but Ireland is neutral. So it's one of those weird, crazy situations that, what do you do then? Do you have a reference sheet,
You know what?
that says
You
New
know what?
Zealand is
If I
this New
remember,
Zealand?
if I remember, I will double check that after.
Oh, yeah,
after
it's-
this video, and that's probably a question worth asking on Discord,
Yeah,
depending on
yeah.
how it's worded.
It's honestly, it's never gonna come up, so I don't think it's worthwhile. But it's
you know what? I would never say never, because
never. Yeah,
even
fair
if they have to define it now,
Yeah.
the designers may take a step back and goes, oh, you know what?
enough. Yeah.
If
Yeah.
that can happen there, we should come over here and define this,
Yeah,
this,
yeah,
and this
yeah.
as well.
They do
You know,
define
it
it.
can kind of trigger kind of like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
we see what we need to do now.
They have defined what certain continents are, like in regions like Europe is this, and they exclude like
Mhm.
the Middle East for like Turkey and such. But I could see it becoming a little bit of an issue when they say stuff like New Zealand. All of New Zealand is like, well, that's never defined as to what New Zealand is. Like, does it include theoretically the Solomon Islands? I mean, no, right? But if it comes up, it might come up somewhere.
Mhm.
Like
Well,
Japanese
and that'll be
islands does.
interesting to see how, and,
Like-
and we ran into this with this question came up a little bit with Crimson Tide, and I even
Mm.
posed it to a buddy, my buddy John, who knows a lot more. He goes, I
Mm.
go, what about the administrative stuff down there? Because you've got Anzac,
Mm,
but then you've got British territories
mm,
in the Pacific Ocean.
right.
And so the money to replenish them comes from Britain. It doesn't come from Anzac or
Yeah.
India.
Yeah.
And I think maybe it's okay to have Britain have a rule where economy to reinforce those islands can become from the FEC or Anzac.
Right.
As a
Yeah.
way- because geographically they're closest, they're closer,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Britain would have just said, "Hey, Anzac, we need to send troops over there."
Yeah.
They were directly under British, command. Even they weren't. I mean, I understand why they're played as a separate nation for the game, but realistically, they were just part of the Commonwealth as a whole. They had British commanders down there, working with the Anzac commanders.
Yeah. And honestly though, it is something that they could touch up on, clean up. It's not important they do, but I think just for the sake of wholeness and also for the sake of expansions, if somebody ever says, well, they need to define some of these things a little bit more clear. Like,
Yes, I
is
think that's a good
Kurile
point.
Islands part of Japan or is it not part of Japan? If somebody says Japanese islands, do they include the Kurile Islands way up north? or
And I
not.
think
'cause
they've
that-
already done a much better job
they
of
have,
that in
they have,
version
yeah,
4.
yeah,
I think you're right, though. There's without a doubt, there's still a couple spots that probably just
yeah,
need to
oh
be
yeah,
addressed.
yeah. Moving on.
So all these other surrender conditions are pretty much the same as they were in version 3. And
Except
it
one
says-
interesting, France only surrenders once per game. I thought that was kind of, I mean, that's probably something that existed in the previous one, but also kind of cool. Like Free France will only exist once, and then France will exist twice, but never 3 times. You know, one of those weird things that
I could
France
see that.
becomes a
Yeah,
new
I
Free
could see
France.
that, you know, for
Yeah,
simplicity's sake.
Yeah.
And okay, we liberated Paris and we lost it. Oh God, do they have any fight left?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, and then Vichy France will never show up again once it's wiped out.
Here, other nations' neutrals do not surrender. They may be eliminated when they no longer have land zones or units, or may be absorbed through alignment. At one point, I thought there was an issue where, and maybe they've reworded it, where neutrals surrender when they've lost all their land territories. But then their navies would go away as well. Their navies would never get absorbed into whoever they would align with. But I think maybe this was added. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
There's fine points that maybe weren't, you know, I didn't necessarily pick up on.
One thing that was added into the game is KMT surrenders. Now, before it used to not surrender as long as they had units on the board.
Correct.
Now they surrender, and I don't like that. And I think it would make sense that they keep on doing it the right, you know, the other way. I think it makes sense. Now, I think a lot of this stuff, sometimes when I read this stuff, is like, well, why did they change that? Well, there's that one game where I managed to survive as KMT in Hong Kong, right? Just hold out there. And maybe that's what they're eliminating, right? One of those things where KMT just moves everything into Hong Kong and holds on to it. So maybe that's the reason why.
Well, but it says here, if it possesses no land zones, so that's legit. If it owns Hong Kong, it's good.
I know, but I just think it's for thematic purposes. What about the CCP, right?
Well, okay, there is an ideological difference between the two, though. KMT is trying to be more of a traditional nation.
Grassroots kind
CCP
of thing.
is more of a grassroots communist movement to form an ideological thing. So I think just from a historical mindset of the two nations, I could see the argument. I could see that being an argument for why they work differently in this. If KMT gets defeated in a traditional kind of sense, then they're defeated.
But KMT is actually a very I've done some. I've read some books recently on the warlords and KMT and such. It was a very fresh nation as well too. I think they would have survived as a grassroots movement easily, right? Like there was a time. So I can't remember his name now. Oh shoot, Marshall. No, Marshall. From the Marshall Plan in Europe during the Cold War, he came to China and tried to coordinate some sort of agreement between the CCP and the KMT, right? And it ebbed and flowed. Like the KMT were doing good, so they didn't want didn't want to meet at the table, and then the CCP were doing well, and so they didn't want to, but the KMT did, and it flowed back and forth. Like the KMT were winning the fight. They had pushed the CCP like all the way into Manchuria, and they were going to win that thing, right? They were going to win. Marshall was saying, you got to stop, because what the CCP were basically doing is withdrawing away from the cities. The KMT would grab the cities, but then the CCP would hold all the countryside, and they're being massively enforced by Japanese, surrendered weapons and by the USSR. But I think legitimately they had enough ground support that if they would have done things differently, they wouldn't have flooded the Yangtze River with that, or whatever, that dam broke the dam.
Yellow
River, and all this other stuff. They would have still had a lot of ground support because KMT was such a fresh nation as it was already. Like it was very recent, 1930.
And that's one of those things that is easily glossed over and oversimplified. When I look up stuff like that, I'm always finding out new facets about how it actually worked and things like that. And I was shocked at the death casualties of that flood when I actually got like, oh my God, it was huge casualties, massive, and the effects of that, and how hell, some Chinese just said, oh yeah, we're throwing over the Japanese.
You know,
just
it was crazy,
crazy situation. But every time you look into that, now part of the problem is also a lot of the records from that time period are untrustworthy or lost, and we'll never get them. We'll never know for sure.
That's right. All right, moving on. So I think the USA is good, and I think we've covered everything essentially. We're down to the next
chapter. Into chapter 6.
And I think that's a good stopping point.
Yeah, probably. Now, if we're going to do, no, one question I have for you, if we're going to do chapter 6, now chapter 6 is pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Let's lump
Except
6, 7.
For the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact.
Yeah, yeah.
Do we want to do 6 lumped with 7 and then a separate video for the pact? I need to do research on the pact.
Oh, I see. Okay.
The pact is, now we could talk about the whole thing except for the pact, and then we can just talk about the pact for the rest of the video, or we can do 6 and 7 together and do a separate video for the pact.
Let's just, could we, it's a tough one. How about this? How about we do the pact? Sorry, chapter 6, do everything but the pact,
Right.
See what time we have. If we have enough time, or if we have half an hour's time, then we do the rest, because I think the rest of it, we could fairly well gloss over the rest of it.
Order
and then
of,
just
order of play is going to be very, well, no, I'm sorry. Order of play is
the next chapter, right?
the next
So I think
chapter. And
next-
there's like 1 or 2 points I want to make in that, and then I'm good.
Next video, let's do just chapter 6, start off with everything else but the pact, then do the pact, and then conclude that video.
Okay.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, excellent. Okay, thank you all for watching and being part of this here, and I'll catch you all later.